take the chair. You're good so far.
I hope everyone had a good lunch. And we are picking back up H67. We got a walkthrough from Legislative Counsel, who is inside the Zoom still with us. And now Representative Stebbins, thanks for joining us on such incredibly short notice. We really appreciate it. And would love to hear anything you want to share with us context-wise on the bill before we hear from JFO and the administration.
Thank you, Chair Kornheiser. For the record, I'm Gabrielle Stebbins. I am a representative down in House and Environment and Energy. I serve the south end of Burlington. And this bill, H67, I think this is actually the fourth time, so year 7, that we're talking about this bill. We did pass it out of the House last year, but it was a different bill. This has been modified, but the concept behind it is similar. We did vote this out 11-0-0 yesterday. And essentially, Vermont currently has 3 extended producer responsibility. There are a whole bunch of gobbledygook, but you guys are used to this in Ways and Means. 3 extended producer responsibility programs, or ERP, that address household hazardous waste here in Vermont currently. And I'll pass this around. I'm sorry I did not send it because I found out I was testifying like 2 seconds ago. No, like an hour ago. So we currently have extended producer responsibility programs for mercury thermostats and light bulbs, electronics, and batteries. And then we have sort of a fee-based program for paint. And all of these are pretty successful in terms of what we're seeing in terms of percentage of Vermonters bringing things in to our solid waste management entities or districts, and just seeing the overall uptake level, and therefore not seeing as much go into the landfill. However, there are a lot of other household hazardous wastes like furniture strippers, paint thinners, glues, adhesives, kerosene, pesticides, pool and hot tub chemicals that are not covered by anything. That doesn't mean that our solid waste management districts aren't taking them. They do take them in. But right now, what they do with the cost of taking that in and disposing it is just put it on our constituents and on us. It basically is either a tax or a disposal fee or some sort of, local charge. So the challenge, and this probably was okay when it was just a little bit and it was a little bit of money, but they're seeing more and more of this household hazardous waste. And they are also, when they do, who knew we did these waste composition studies? People actually go into our landfills and dig through like once every 5 years to find out what's actually in them. And they are finding a lot of this household hazardous waste in them, even though we do have homeowners bringing the waste to our solid waste management districts. So currently our solid waste management districts have to hold at least 2 events a year to collect this, and then we, the taxpayers, pay for it. But it's costing them $2.2 million a year. And again, a lot of it is still going to the landfill. So the administration, Agency of Natural Resources, and the districts came together and they said, we really got to do something. Also, we've been talking about this for 3 bienniums. Maybe we could try and figure out a plan that works for both parties. So what this does is it falls in line with those EPRs. Basically, it requires that a stewardship organization, which is run by the manufacturers, a stewardship organization, which is often a nonprofit with like 3 or 4 staff, is required to be developed. And then that stewardship organization basically registers the manufacturers, the brands, and the products that are going to be covered under this program. And they develop a collection plan that must include a free statewide collection service. They identify convenient locations. They do public education and outreach. They have to abide by performance goals. They complete an annual report, and then they undergo an audit by ANR every 5 years with ongoing oversight by ANR. And essentially all manufacturers that sell in Vermont are required to be part of the stewardship organization. This was a point of concern in our committee. Folks saying, well, does that mean a small mom and pop store, all of a sudden the product disappears or they're charged more? What we found with the universal recycling bill is that there was like about a week that a couple of products went off the shelf, and then it took about a week for that to be addressed and modified. But we did take testimony in that because there was some concern. So in sum, right now, taxpayers are paying for these wastes to be disposed of properly. It's getting more expensive, and a bunch of it is going to Coventry. They're pretty nasty products, flammable, corrosive, reactive, not exactly something we want in our landfill. So why an EPR? It really does improve diversion from landfills. It reduces costs to taxpayers. Thank you. It'll lessen environmental and public health risks in terms of leakage or just when people don't know what to do. Uncle Joe passed and they've got to empty out the garage in like 3 days, ensuring that we're actually minimizing that risk. And this is what's a core piece of an EPR. It really places the burden of household hazardous waste management with the manufacturers instead of with ANR. Some of the other programs, it's really placed with ANR. This places it with the manufacturers. It says, hey, businesses, this is your product. Figure out how best to address this. And so that also allows the businesses to identify ways to make the overall program more efficient. If businesses identify that they might be able to cut waste upstream in their manufacturing processes, it basically points the incentive to who we want it pointed to, which is the manufacturer. And again, it has incredible support. I think we heard, I don't know how many solid waste management districts, a lot from all over the state, very, very supportive, ANR supportive, and 11-0 vote.
Thank you. Representative Bodie.
Thank you. Are they doing this in any other country near us?
Canada, right up north. EPRs are pretty well known, and this structure, we actually have the structure in place already because the solid waste management districts are already collecting it, which is why some of the timeframes that you see might look concise, but it's like a year and a half, I think, from start to finish. But we already have all the collection processes going on. So it's more an administrative stewardship organization piece, and then really figuring out the agreements between the manufacturers, ANR. But yeah, just north of us, I think it's Toronto. Not necessarily all the same products, because they have different programs and policies. Yeah.
So the 2.2 million cost to the solid waste districts now, how did they come up with that figure?
They have to separate out their waste and they have to report how much they're processing. And then they pay for it, and then they ask, and then they charge essentially. So they do actually track how much they're processing and what that costs to them when they then transfer it to whatever disposal company comes to pick it up and bring it elsewhere.
By weight or volume?
Yes. Is that what you're asking? Yes. My understanding, depending on the waste, is a lot of times they pour different wastes into one big barrel. It's not a bucket, it has a cover.
5-gallon drum.
Drum. Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Taylor.
Are you familiar with the ARC recycling centers?
Yes.
Advanced recycling centers?
Yes.
I was wondering how this compares to that.
This was
Business model.
mentioned in testimony. I don't remember that we fleshed that out. I'm happy to look into it and get back to you.
Probably not necessary.
I'm sorry. Although I really appreciate you guys asking me questions because I prefer it here than on the floor. So I will look into that in case you ask me on the floor.
I won't ask you. Not if I ask you here. Okay.
I'll look into it. It was mentioned. I don't remember if it was mentioned as an example of what could work or what's working elsewhere. I can't remember the context. We took a lot of testimony.
It's not for hazardous waste, but
Yeah.
it's for other kinds of waste. But it's the same kind of stewardship, sort of an organization, I think. And it might, and if you're building on the solid waste district facilities, these people also know a lot about how to recycle things and how to talk to manufacturers and things like that, so.
So once you mentioned it's not about household hazardous waste, I think the testimony we've heard ARC mentioned in is actually related to the bottle bill, which is also a proposed EPR. Well, that's where the context came from.
Oh,
And we might get a chance to talk about that at some point in the next few weeks.
With a different rep. Thank you.
Yes.
okay, good, thanks.
Yes, Representative Sims, thanks for reminding me.
Thanks. Thanks for all the work on this bill. Sometimes my experience living in the far flungs of our state is that, statewide programs sometimes struggle to be able to offer the same level of service everywhere. And, appreciate the language in the bill around convenient collection locations. And wondered what your sense is about whether this approach will continue current access to getting rid of household hazardous waste or increase access, and or how we might ensure that the plan moving forward thinks about geographic access.
So we did hear from the manager of the Northeast Kingdom Solid Waste Management District. It's really interesting that the districts actually vary not only in structure, but in terms of what they collect. This bill would presumably, because it has performance goals that need to increase, would presumably involve increased outreach, public education, as well as collection opportunities. And in terms of the plan, I mean, the collection plan has to be written every year. And then the annual report, actually, I don't know if that's true. I will look that up. The annual report has to be done every year, which does report on how much is collected, what it costs, what the outreach numbers were in terms of household numbers, et cetera. So that'll definitely provide an indication of whether or not it's working and improving.
Well, thanks. Did you?
I did want to ask, thank you. Are there other states that are doing it this way?
There are other states that have EPRs, but for household hazardous waste, we would be the first.
It's always good to have some kind of a financial incentive in there. Did you talk about the idea of when somebody brings in 5 gallons of paint, they get $2 or something, or they get 50 cents, or was there any discussion of incentives to get people to come in aside from their kindness to the environment?
We didn't. We were really thinking about how to close the current loophole, the current 2.2 million. Household hazardous waste is funny. It's not something you drop off every week, right? It's something that you do like once every 3 years, maybe, when you're like, oh my gosh, I have no room in my basement because of the 18 cans of paint that have been here for 2 decades. So that's part of the rationale also is, I don't know if that would help. We didn't take testimony on it, but I think the critical piece is really making sure that people know that they can bring it there and they're not dumping it and that taxpayers aren't paying for it.
Representative Bodie?
Well, I was just going to say that, and then I wasn't going to raise my hand, but anyway, is the producers can figure that out when they have higher goals. They might decide to create incentives in addition to educational campaigns and so forth. So maybe that would happen.
They could find that it would be more efficient to actually do that. I mean, and they could do an analysis that would look at if we gave this much in incentives, we would actually see this much more come back. And that's one of the reasons why it's helpful to have the businesses at the table sort of overseeing the program with A&R oversight.
Thank you, Representative Stebbins. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for hearing, and thank you for highlighting that sub piece
Oh, the part that wasn't supposed to be there? You know, honestly, I would like for our committee to take credit for it, but I do believe that Michael O'Grady actually just realized it was there while he was reading the bill to us. So we will amend it on behalf of everyone, but I
Thank you.
can't take credit for finding it.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks for your work.
Oh, here.
Propaganda.
Is appropriate.
We're gonna hear from Joint Fiscal with Dan Dickerson, and then we're gonna hear from A&R today.
Good afternoon. Once again, before you, Dan Dickerson, Joint Fiscal on H67. As far as fiscal impacts, you'll probably hear from me the same thing that you'll also hear from A&R, because that's who I reached out to as far as what the staffing need might be. But I'll just go through, I guess, some of the dates because, you know, and you heard these, I'm sure, from Mike O'Grady, but the bill proposes to ban the sale of household products with hazardous materials starting on July 1, 2025, unless manufacturer of said material participates in a stewardship organization that meets the criteria set out in the bill. No later than January 1, 2025, stewardship organizations that represent one or more manufacturers would need to sort of organize and submit collection plans that meet criteria set out in the bill to A&R. And then they would need to register with the state annually starting on July 1, 2024. So I'm sort of working backwards here, but and A&R would have the oversight responsibility for these stewardship organizations. So reviewing the collection plans, annual reports, receiving the registration materials, and supervising the organizations. And then sort of separately but relatedly, the A&R would have to recommend some sort of registration fee for stewardship organizations on or before January 15th, 2024. And then significantly, these materials would be banned from solid waste and landfills starting on July 1, 2025. So as far as fiscal impacts, you know, based on what I heard from A&R, and as far as like what would directly impact money coming into the state and expenditures of state funds, I don't estimate an impact at this time. However, there are some items that could come up in the future. First being staffing with A&R. I reached out to Matt Chapman, who I think he's here, who I think you'll hear from. And, you know, he said that based on the fact that there is already some oversight of hazardous material collection and disposal within A&R, that, you know, at least over the next few years, they can cover the responsibilities that they would have. Although there's a possibility that as the program is implemented and they look at how it fits within the other responsibilities it has for overseeing the battery stewardship and the paint stewardship, you know, in the future, there could be a request for new staffing. So I think at this time, there's not a staffing need, which means there isn't a funding need, but that could come up, which I guess is more an appropriations item, but just so you're aware. And then the fee, there's no fee created in the bill. So the bill itself does not create new revenues, but it does set a sort of process in motion that could result in a future fee that would raise revenue for the state.
Does anyone have any? Thanks for writing those things down, Dan.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Mr. Chapman, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the committee. Appreciate you being here and making yourself available on somewhat short notice.
Not a problem. So for the record, my name is Matt Chapman. I am the Director of the Waste Management and Prevention Division within the Department of Environmental Conservation. And I think Dan did a really great job of sort of running through sort of a summary of the fiscal analysis with respect to this bill. I mean, we have maybe taking one step back, we currently require collection opportunities for household hazardous waste by solid waste districts and municipalities in the state. So that takes place right now. The state both oversees that through the hazardous waste management program, the sort of general regulatory structure set up by that, and then tracks it through our solid waste management program. So there's reporting requirements and so forth. The main thing that this bill does is shift some of the planning responsibility to manufacturers, and then also provides a stable funding source for municipalities to ensure that the costs of running these programs aren't borne by municipal taxpayers, but rather by the people who generate these products in the first instance. So from an A&R oversight perspective, we are already sort of doing, I think, the core of the oversight of the substances themselves. The additional work will be sort of supervising this producer responsibility organization that gets formed to fund and oversee this. We've had a lot of experience with that over the past several years. The state has passed a number of producer responsibility based laws. They actually, once those organizations are stood up, they significantly relieve the administrative burden on state government by performing a lot of those functions in lieu of sort of standing up a regulatory program and doing things ourselves. So they're very effective from that perspective. Again, I think Dan noted, we have not done I have not done a deep dive on like preparing a fee because the fee is a year out. So we have not sort of looked in depth at like what the budget might be or what the staffing needs might be. But I think that as this program is stood up, it makes sense to take a look at all of our EPR programs and the fees associated with them and the work that's done by them. And sort of do sort of a broader program review to make sure that they're functioning well, the fees are appropriate, and they're adequately staffed to make sure that the sort of inspection and compliance in, which is, I think, if there's one thing we probably could do a little bit more of, it's probably on the inspection and compliance end of things. But we haven't sort of done that analysis yet. So I don't know if you have any specific questions about the bill itself and our administration of things.
I imagine Representative Sims does, but before she does, she's being very consistent today, and I appreciate that. Are you saying that you're going to bring us sort of a broader fee request looking across?
So we're gonna next year bring you a fee request, and then I think it's a part of whenever our next triennial review is. I think the EPR programs. Yeah,
Okay. No, I'm sorry. You kept a straight face. I should have kept a straight face. That's okay.
So.
Okay. And then are you going to have enough information before the program starts to be able to figure out how much it'll cost you to run the program?
I think we'll have enough time to look at what similar programs in like Ontario and other places.
Okay, thanks. Representative Sims.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm certainly very interested in this program and making sure that taxpayers aren't bearing the costs and dispose of stuff that manufacturers originate. I want to make sure that we're doing that in a way that allows everyone to equitably access and participate in the program. And so I guess I have maybe a few questions. One is around the performance goal, where there's, it seems like clarity around seeking increased participation rates. And I wonder whether you could, how you might see a focus on participation rates affecting where and how we locate programs and do, that focus only on the number of people participating. Does that create an incentive to do more outreach and offer more locations in places where more people are likely to go?
So I think one of the things that was identified natural resources, and I think it's something that we want to do a larger dive into after the original plan is adopted, is what is the right performance goal for this program. Participation rates are important, and making sure that people have access to conveniently located facilities is important. But I think we also want to make sure that there's that we're not setting a participation or a performance goal that maximizes that sort of participation, but doesn't emphasize sort of like using the products up and, some of these, right? So some of the goal of this is to not have a waste at the end of the day in the first place. Have things right-sized, make sure people understand what they should be buying to do what they need. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for manufacturer education to prevent. So
Well, and just to be more clear about where I'm going, my concern would be that focus only on participation rate and not geographic distribution of access might suggest we have a lot more events in Chittenden County because we can increase, meet our participation goals and not serve people in Guildhall and Lowell.
I agree. Well, that's something we actively work to not have happen. So we have this program. We also have a state materials management plan, which is sort of our planning document for solid waste management in the state. And we do require in that document HHW collection and facilities basically geographically distributed and convenient for consumers. So we try and make sure that those things are addressed. But I agree with you that that's always something we try and focus in on when we develop these types of programs, is making sure we're not leaving sort of rural Vermont behind or making it difficult for people who live in rural areas to access this.
Yeah, so certainly I'm glad to hear that that's an important way of how you all think about standing up your programs. I guess I wish I saw that a little bit more explicitly in the language, and similarly have some concerns around the language at the end, looking at cost effectiveness as one of the metrics of success. Again, I think cost effectiveness is so important, and also if we only look at that as a measure for success, the programs in my region where it may cost the same to put it on and you have less folks participate or less product produced, that may, create a disincentive for serving small communities. I'm certainly a little concerned about that.
Sure.
Okay, and my questions.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna throw this in. You guys have a lot of fees.
We do.
So if you come back to us with an update of your fees, that's gonna take some time.
So, with respect to this, it requires us to come back during the next year with a fee for this program. So, and that is what
Right.
we're committed to doing.
Okay, and so, and then getting back to the straight face thing, I really appreciate that. I mean, we all saw the humor around there. But what's happening with you guys and with everybody else in state government since we haven't had a fee bill in 7 years, which is exactly the length of time I have been gone, by the way?
Maybe it's because
We're waiting for you to get back.
Well, we're in trouble because everybody's taking it out of their general fund. And so there's a cost to you now. So, and I'm wondering if, even though this one doesn't have a cost right now, if there's gonna be a cost to you that we're not counting on, that we, like staff. And
So I think over the next fiscal year that this program, there's little in the way of A&R sort of work that needs to take place. There's some time under the bill to give manufacturers an opportunity to basically work together and form what's called the Producer Responsibility Organization, right? So they're going to have to deal with, frankly, a lot of the legal agreements between themselves so that they can find out who's paying for what and how much they're paying and how they're going to develop this plan. And then they come to us. And that's sort of when our work starts. And I believe that, and again, I'm operating by memory, I believe that the House or that the Environment and Energy Committee has both the initial report that they are supposed to file with us and the fee coming in January of next year. So they're close in time. The fee request will be made close in time to when we receive the first thing that agency staff will be required to work on. So it's imperfect, but it's not, I think it's something that we can manage, and it won't be a significant outlay of agency time or effort.
because I don't want it to end up in the laps of the taxpayers either. But, if it comes out of the general fund, it's in the laps of the taxpayers. That's where we get that money. But anyway, thank you. And it's good to see you.
It's nice to see you
And
too.
I already saw your wife.
I know, she told me, so.
Thank you.
I'm trying to see the way that this is actually going to progress. So we pass the law and then the manufacturers are going to magically get together and say, I'm selling in Vermont. Who's going to pull all the manufacturers together and do that work?
Well, so the obligation is on them to basically report, or by January 1 of next year, to form and be a part of a producer responsibility organization in the state of Vermont, right? So inevitably, there probably will be some outreach through trade associations. So we'll reach out, and I mean, the trade associations have been involved already in the other in-house environment and energy. So they're aware that this obligation is out there and that this bill is pending. And basically, if they want to continue selling their products, they have to be involved in one of these organizations.
We're kind of a small market, and the temptation would be to say, okay, I'll sell it somewhere else.
So we've had that concern expressed before in the past with other producer responsibility organizations. That's not been what we've seen happen when these get formed, right? The manufacturers, at the end of the day, we did some really quick sort of back of the envelope, like how much might this cost each manufacturer? And it's not in a huge amount of money when you look across the number of products and the number of manufacturers that are out there.
No, I agree. I think that's probably true, but that's getting them together.
Oh, I understand.
And what other EPR programs do you have?
So we have a program for battery collection. So batteries, paint, mercury lamps, mercury thermostats, and electronic waste.
So that let's use the battery one.
Mm-hmm.
So battery manufacturers have gotten together and formed a stewardship organization that handles all this. And do they actually take the batteries back and recycle them or do what they want themselves? Or does the stewardship organization responsible for getting rid of them?
The stewardship organization is responsible for managing the batteries back. So the manufacturers basically delegate their responsibility to this, think of it sort of as a new nonprofit organization that they've created to deal with both the collection facility setting up or ensuring that there's collection, but also the management of materials that have been taken back through that collection.
Okay. Good, thanks.
Yeah, how many, I know that the paint cans go back to the hardware store.
They do.
Oh, batteries?
I am pretty sure that they go to solid waste district collection facilities.
Fluorescent lights, is that just the manufacturers did that on their own?
Well, I believe that fluorescent lights are mercury containing, most of the ballast that you deal with. So they're required to be taken back under that program. And that one is actually, that program's through your hardware stores as well.
Are there any others that go back to the store?
I would need to check. I think those are the main ones. I mean, there are some stores that have registered to be a collection point for e-waste. So like, I sell a computer, you can bring your computer back when you're buying a new one type of thing.
Car battery can go back. I also know about the one where when you open your door to your car and the light goes on automatically, when that gets recycled right at car repair shops, and it goes into a little box, and then eventually they mail that off.
Is that mercury in it?
Yeah.
Probably, yes.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
So on H67, I think there are a few more folks that are interested in testifying on that. So we're gonna see if we can hear from them and then try to vote this out, maybe first thing next week if we can. Or maybe later today, if they can get in today, I don't know. So be thinking if there's anything else anyone needs on this bill. Okay.